The room smelled of coffee and tired cloth. Flags hung on the walls like old promises. Bright screens filled the air with maps and dots. Men and women in careful suits spoke in small voices. Their words fell into lines and lists. Outside, the stars kept their distance. Commander Raffi stood at the back of the hall. He listened the way other people breathed. He had worked with diplomats for years. He knew how a single sentence could stop a war. Tonight the sentences did not stop anything. They slid and broke like thin ice. On the largest screen, a map showed a thin line of human colonies. Each dot had a name. Each name had people behind it. A new envoy's message blinked at the edge of the map. It was not a message of talk. It looked like music on the screen, patterns of tones and light. The translators tried to read it. Machines chewed the data and died. The text came back wrong. What do they want? Someone asked. The question hung and then shook apart. The envoy's signal repeated. The tones were cold and perfect. Where words had failed, the sound did not. The signal shaped itself like a finger that pointed to the smallest human colony on the map. The colony had been built on a thin green world where fields still grew and children still ran with bare feet. Now the signal said, in a way no one could translate, move. Ambassadors argued. Cameras flashed. People in cities watched and grew afraid. No one wanted war. No one wanted to hear a sound that could not be argued with. Harumi sat on the other side of the hall. She was the commander of a small fleet. Her hands were steady, but her eyes had a tired sharpness. She had learned to read other people's moves. The envoy's pattern felt like a net. It was not loud. It was precise. It shaped the air around the colony. A thin bell tone came from a far radio. It matched a line in the envoy's pattern. The bell slipped across the room and fell into the map. A pulse of light traveled from star to star and stopped at the little colony. For a moment, everything breathed in the same rhythm. Then a different signal answered a simpler beat from the colony's old radio codes. The two rhythms touched and made a new sound, one the humans had never heard before. Raffi felt it in his chest like a small knock. He stepped forward and put his hand on the metal console. The console hummed under his palm. He had no plan. He only knew the sound wanted an answer that sounded like them. People had used music to soothe storms and prayers for long ago. Maybe sound could hold a city as well. Send a pulse, he said. His voice was small, but the room heard it. Harumi watched the fleet positions on the screen. The foreign ships moved like dancers in slow arcs. Their engines flared in patterns, not in words. Lines of light trailed behind them like sentences written in space. Where a normal enemy would draw a straight knife, these ships wrote threats in curves. The humans had no treaty for this. In a hangar, engineers, musicians, and codesmiths gathered. They worked like a small orchestra. An old drummer tapped a rhythm while a young coder changed engine beats into notes. A light artist painted arcs across a hollow screen. They did not have time to be clever. They had to make a new way to say, "We will not leave." The first human pulse was small. It came from a scout ship and rolled across the sky like a slow clap. It timed itself to the colony's beacon. The foreign fleet stiffened and answered with a long, thin chord that tasted like warning. The human pulse did not match. It carried a human thing, a question, not a demand. The rhythm asked, "Why?" The foreign chord softened for a moment. A small ship slowed. On the colony, children kept playing under street lights. They did not know how close they were to being claimed by sound. Parents watched the sky and measured the beats. A camera beam caught a line of light moving across the stars. People at home listened and argued in every language. The new language did not speak with the old laws. There were no ambassadors trained in rhythm. There were no judges who could weigh a light arc and decide if it was aggression. In the quiet hours, that thought felt dangerous. A sound could break a law without breaking a bone. That night the feeds filled with images of light weaving in the dark. Harumi's crew tuned their sensors and learned to read the pulses. They found that sequences of engine beats could mean watch, that flash patterns could mean challenge, and that slow arcs meant we claim. They also found danger. A badly timed beat could make a ship's hull complain and die. Machines misunderstood the human rhythms. A light pattern meant to say stop could tell an older AI that the floor no longer existed. One mistake could kill. Raffi slept little. He dreamed of thin lines across the sky. He saw bright arcs writing words that had no letters. He woke with the taste of a chord on his tongue. In the morning, more signals came. The envoy sent a pattern that knocked out a colony's comms for an hour. The silence that followed felt like a hand closing. People began to name the new thing. Some called it art. Some called it weapon. Children called it exciting. Older men called it lawless. The truth was smaller and larger. The world had learned that words could fail, and when they did, sounds filled the gap. At the edge of the map, the little colony lit its beacon. A human pulse crossed the dark to meet the foreign chord. The two signals touched like an old handshake. For one long breath, the stars held their notes. Then the foreign fleet moved again. The war that might have been quiet changed shape. It was no longer about guns and flags only. It was about music, motion, and who could order the sky. Raffi and Harumi watched the map and felt the silence that spoke. They knew what diplomats could not. When words broke, people would make a new way to say no. They would shape the sky. They would teach others to answer. The world shifted and listened. They called them sound makers at first. Then the name changed to rhythmers. Later the papers used the word tacticians. Harumi did not care what they were called. She cared that they worked. The new language of war had spread like a quick light. People who once wrote treaties now learned beats. Harumi's ship glided over black space. Below, a convoy drifted under a thin shield. The convoy carried food and medicine to a planet under threat. Engineers had built a small net of lights and pulses around it. The net moved like a slow hand, saying, "Follow this path. Trust this beat." In a small room deep in the ship, Jorah pulled a thin drum toward her. Jorah was not a soldier. She was an old sound engineer who loved rhythms and machines. Her hands were steady. She tapped a slow count. The drum's beats became code. A coder at a console turned the code into engine hiccups and light flashes. A pilot in the hangar practiced the movement until it felt like walking. At first the work felt like play. Young recruits learned rhythms in game rooms. Children's rhythm toys became training tools. A boy who won a popular rhythm game taught pilots how to improvise. The pilots learned to make sentences with flight paths and light trails. A loop of 3 lights meant safe lane. A sharp, short flash meant caution. A slow, wide arc meant claim. The enemy watched and learned too. Their ships answered with cold, stark rhythms. They sent thin chords that could confuse a ship's sensors. A badly timed chord could make an old navigation AI think the sky had moved. One training run ended with a model ship spinning because it thought its floor had gone. Machines could be tricked, minds could be touched. The convoy left the system under the human net. Drones watched. Minds that heard old radio words stayed silent because the new language told them the convoy was not a target. Families on the surface watched with their lights and phones. Voices rose with hope. The convoy passed through a dangerous field without a shot fired. The crew cheered. Some called it a miracle. Others called it a new kind of danger. Danger came quietly. A rhythm could be weaponized to open memory vaults in a ship's system. The attackers learned to fold deep logs into a pulse and send them back at the enemy. Ships that heard those pulses would stop and read their own histories. Pilots would fall into old grief, crews would open private files and stare at faded faces. Boarding teams followed and took ships with no battle. Harumi watched a carrier go dark while her pilots looked at photos of lost children. The carrier was taken without firing a weapon. That night Harumi walked through a mess hall of low lights. Men and women ate in small groups. The room smelled of coffee and fried bread. Someone had put a small speaker in the corner and played a rhythm that matched a ship's engine. A pilot looked up, lips moving to a beat he did not know he knew. The new language reached into small things. It made life strange. Raffi argued in private. He wanted rules. Joro wanted care. They both feared the art could become a weapon. The more powerful the rhythms, the more they could break a machine or a mind. A secret file reached Harumi's desk. It showed a rhythm pack sold by a silent company. The pack promised to shut down an entire fleet for 10 heartbeats. The cost was high. Who sells this? Harumi asked. Her voice was flat. Private groups, the officer said. For desperate clients. Harumi thought of the children on the convoy and the carrier that had been taken. Desperation made market. Market made war easy. Across the city, artists and musicians met in small rooms. Some refused to work for military plans. Others believed their art could save lives. A young artist built a light harp that played chords calming enough to stop a panic. He offered it to medics and hospitals. A doctor used it to calm a patient whose breathing had been stolen by a bad rhythm. She wept and said the sound felt like home. In the dark between stars, the language changed hands like contraband. Smugglers carried rhythm packs in shipping crates. Rebels bought them to free towns. Corporations bought them to protect factories. The world tried to make laws, but laws move slow and beats move faster. A test mission ended in silence. Harumi sent a disguised scout to study an enemy pattern. The scout recorded a thin sequence that made machines dream of their first boot. For a long hour, Harumi listened to the tape in a small room. The crew slept while the tape played. It sounded like a lullaby for iron. Harumi felt sick. She thought of how easily a memory could be turned into a trap. Still, not all rhythms were knives. A child in a besieged street found a small drum and beat a rhythm that matched the calming harp. The sound moved up into the sky and touched both sides. Fighters stopped to listen. A pilot in the enemy fleet opened a hatch and watched children below. For one brief moment, the sky did not carry a threat. It carried a song. That song spread on the nets. People made small choirs and sent their beats into space. Musicians who had taught soldiers now taught schools. The world learned that this new speech could heal as much as it could harm. But the harm waited. A black market sold harsh rhythm packs. A broken AI could be fooled. A grieving soldier could be used by a clever hand. Harumi sat alone and watched the stars draw arcs like tense fingers. She believed the language might save the convoy and feed the planet. She also believed it could make children cry again and again for a past that never belonged to them. She made a decision. The fleet would train not to punish but to protect. They would build shields that listened and refused to open to banned patterns. They would teach people to recognize a dangerous beat. They could not stop every harm. They could try. In the morning, the convoy reached the planet. People cheered in the streets. Food went where it was needed. Harumi watched from a balcony and felt the new music pulse below like a promise. Around her, people learned to tap and hum the beats of safe lanes and calming songs. The world changed its words into rhythm, and the change moved fast. Some called them sound makers. Harumi called them guardians. She hoped that guards who used song would guard more than borders. She hoped they would guard memory and life. The sky hummed with new speech, and the people listened with fear and hope in the same breath. The new language felt like wonder at first. People called it clever and brave. Then it stopped being only clever. It learned to hurt. Harumi woke to bad news. A carrier had gone dark near a supply lane. The crew tried to ping it. No answer. When they finally opened the carrier's last log, the faces on the screen were pale and fixed. The crew had not died from fire or crash. They had stopped because they would not move. The carrier's systems had pulled every log and every memory and shown them to the people on the bridge. The men and women of the carrier sat and watched their private pictures until they could not act. Raffi read the report and felt cold. Engineers called the attack a reminder. The enemy had folded memories into a rhythm. When machines played that rhythm, people fell into old grief. Ships could be taken without a shot. The enemy did not fire. They made the mind pause. Jorah slammed her fist on a table. She had built rhythms to save lives. She had never wanted music to be a trap. "We must stop this," she said. Her voice shook. She looked at the files of the carrier. Faces of children, letters from home, a father's joke. The attackers had used these like keys. They had turned memory into chains. Harumi gathered a small team. They would not shout. They planned to move quiet. The team was a mix: pilots who could read light, hackers who could hear rhythm, and a diver who could feel the small changes a pulse made to metal. They would find the device that made the reminders and take it. The mission began under a gray star. The team slipped close to the enemy's patrol line. They flew in a shape that meant friend until they were a whisper away. Then they opened a small window and sent a listening drone. The drone returned with a thin file, a recording of a lullaby folded into a pulse. It sounded like a child singing through noise. Harumi felt her throat close. "It sounds like home," she said. But wrong. They traced the signal to a small, unmarked ship. It moved slow and kept to the dark. Harumi ordered a quiet boarding. The team cut the hull and climbed inside. The ship smelled of old oil and wire. The bridge had a single console and a stack of drives. One drive pulsed with a blue light in a rhythm that made Harumi dizzy. It felt like fingers on a wound. A voice from the speakers said nothing. The drives hummed. A hacker named Tessera moved close and tried to copy the drive. Her hands were quick but careful. The drive fought back. Images flooded the boarding team's heads: a woman on a beach, a child laughing, an old city burning. The images were not theirs, but the team felt them as if they were. A pilot dropped to his knees with tears streaming. His hands shook. A diver covered his ears. Tessera hit the override and tore the drive from the console. The ship's lights went dead. The team escaped with the drive wrapped in a blanket. Outside, the sky felt brittle. The enemy ships glanced their way and then moved on as if nothing happened. The boarding had worked. They had taken the device. Back on Harumi's carrier, the team kept the drive in a quiet room. Engineers built blockers around it. They played the drive once in slow and safe pieces. The sounds were small then: one note, one short memory. They learned it was a pattern made of memory fragments. Each fragment fit a human mind like a key to a lock. The device used those locks to stop people from moving. The discovery shocked the galaxy. Some leaders called it a crime. Others called it terror. Laws were slow, and the harms were fast. Raffi wanted to destroy the drive outright. Jorah argued for study. She wanted to know how to shield minds and stop the pulses from working again. The debate grew hot. People argued in halls and on nets. Some said humans should answer the weapon with equal force. Others said that using the same trick would make them the same. A spy in Harumi's crew changed the fight. He sent a message to a rival group. He said the team had the device and he wanted payment. Harumi learned of the betrayal when an alarm screamed. A boarding team had come for the drive. They struck at night. The carrier rocked from the impact. The bridge went dark. Men shouted orders with guns in their hands. In the chaos, a small group of soldiers grabbed the drive and ran. Harumi chased them through corridors turned to smoke. In one room she found a man holding the drive and smiling like a child. He had played the device for himself. He had wanted to see his lost home. The device showed him a memory that was not his and he wept. He did not want to leave. He would not. Harumi reached him and saw the drive glow. The man pressed it to his chest and the ship's alarms quieted. He would not move. Harumi faced a difficult choice. Shoot and take the device, risking the crew's minds. Or let the man keep it and lose the tool. She chose a third way. She used a shield pulse learned from Jorah. A counterbeat that did not force memory but replaced it with a short, clear pattern: breathe, stand, leave. The man blinked and dropped the drive. Soldiers cuffed him. The carrier shuddered and the stolen team ran. The device was safe for now. But safety was small and fragile. The stolen device did one more thing before the engineers could quiet it. It played a single long file at full power. The file was not machine noise. It was a child's lullaby in a voice that no one in the team knew. The lullaby filled the quiet room and then the whole carrier. It made people stop and listen. In the melody, a word slid through that matched the enemy's old pattern. It named one thing: a place. When the engineers slowed the file, they did not only hear the lullaby. They saw a map hidden in the notes, a map to a deeper archive. The enemy had not only built a weapon. They had left a trail. Raffi read the map and felt the old cold come back. They learned this from us, he said. Or from the same place. The team had a choice. Follow the map and find more answers and dangers. Or bury the device and try to forget. Harumi looked at the faces around her. Some were tired. Some were ready. The carrier's lights hummed with the small beat of life. A new kind of war had taken lives without blood. Now it had given them a map. The final choice hung like a note in the air. They would follow it. The map from the lullaby changed everything. It led to a cold place in space where old records slept. Engineers unlocked a small archive and found songs, codes, and messages from many years ago. The files showed that several cultures once used sound to promise peace. Over time, someone had bent those songs into weapons. The truth made the enemy look less like monsters and more like people who had been hurt and then struck back. News of the archive spread fast. People watched as the files played on slow loops. The lullaby, the same tune that had frozen crews, showed up in the records of more than one people. It had been a shared peace song. Someone had taken it and tightened it until it could lock a mind. Leaders felt the weight of that history. A meeting was needed, not of generals, but of musicians, engineers, diplomats, and judges. They chose a ruined station that floated above a neutral moon. The station had no flags. It had only a ring of lights and a long table. The place itself seemed to ask for calm. Harumi and Raffi arrived with tired steps. They had seen the worst of the new language. They had taken a device and followed a map. Now they would ask for rules. Around the table, people argued not only from fear but from memory. Some delegates wanted total bans. Others wanted technological control. Musicians said the art must live. Engineers said some controls were possible. Judges said rules must be written so future leaders could follow them. Outside the meeting, artists and students gathered. They did not want their music silenced. They painted the station with slow light shows. Inside, Harumi and Raffi listened to demonstrations of what the new speech could do. A team played a safe pattern that calmed a small robot. Another team played a bad pattern that made a drone open and spill its cargo of scrap. The room held its breath. The demos were not for show. They proved the need for law. After days of talks, a small set of rules formed. People called it the Treaty of Echoes. It named several clear lines. No use of memory waves on living crews. No signals that mimic distress calls. No patterns that cause life support to shut. A ban on commercial sale of harmful rhythm packs. The words felt small beside the power they aimed to stop. Still, The treaty was the first map of the New World. Many leaders signed it. Many did not. Some fleets sailed away angry. Some corporations refused to give up their secret pacts. The treaty became a thin shield, real where it held, fragile where it did not. To make the treaty mean anything, enforcement teams formed. They were small and fast. They called themselves Echo Guards. The Echo Guards had musicians, pilots, and engineers. They learned to read illegal beats and to block them. Their ships moved like dancers and carried shields that listened. Where a bad rhythm tried to touch a bridge, the Echo Guard would play a counter pattern that kept minds free. The treaty's first week was hard. A private fleet broke a rule and used a sharp cord near a crowded market. People panicked and several small machines failed. The Echo Guards moved in and calmed the scene with a harmony designed to steady nerves. They rescued children who had been trapped in a jammed lift and carried food boxes to people stuck in closed shops. The world saw the guards as heroes. But profit moved faster than law. A secret company sold rhythm packs on the black market. A spy ring used them to rob a convoy. Harumi and her team tracked one shipment to a wreck station and found crates of small devices that played short, cruel beats. The scene made her hands shake. People could buy cruelty like a tool. The biggest test of the treaty came when a convoy carrying medicine was stuck near a disputed lane. The convoy had no fight left in it. Pirates used a rhythm pack to make the convoy's pilots read old logs and refused to fly. The Echo Guards rushed. They had no right to fire. The law said so. So they used the new language for repair, a pattern that did not take memory but gave clear steps: breathe, stand, steer. They worked in shifts, layering beats until the pilots opened their eyes and moved. On the bridge of the convoy, a child sat beside a pilot and tapped a small drum without meaning to. The beat matched a calming pattern the guards used. The pilot smiled weakly and started the engines. People on the convoy wept. Cameras in cities showed the rescue and many hands clapped in small rooms across systems. The treaty felt alive for a moment. Still, not everyone agreed with the treaty or the guards' methods. Some artists cried censorship. Some commanders called the guards weak. Corporations plotted ways around the rules. A man who sold rhythm packs went to ground. A fleet that had refused to sign the treaty built a test device and hid it in a wreck. The new language would not die because of a paper. In the quiet after the convoy rescue, Harumi sat with Raffi and Jorah. They spoke low and raw. Jorah wanted to teach more people to resist harmful beats. Raffi wanted better law enforcement. Harumi wanted both. They knew that rules could not stop every harm. They knew that people would use the new speech for profit or pain. But they also held the image of the convoy pilots rising and steering home. That image mattered. At the end of the summit, a child stood on the station's outer balcony. He had no title and no vote. He drummed a small rhythm on a metal rail. The beat matched an old peace song from the archive. The guards nearby listened and put their hands over their hearts. The child smiled. For one small moment, the different bands at the station synced and a light like a slow tide moved over the ring. The Treaty of Echoes was signed. It was not perfect. It was not complete. It was a promise written where promises were needed most. Around the galaxy, small groups began to teach the treaty's patterns in schools. Some refused. Some broke the rules the next week. But a seed had been planted. Harumi left the station with a small pack of score-safe patterns, rules, and a list of banned beats. She carried them like tools. The map from the lullaby had brought danger. It had also brought a path forward, law made by music, guarded by humans who would not let sound be a weapon without consequence. They had won a treaty. They had not won peace. The work had only begun. Years passed, and the sky learned to speak in new ways. The Treaty of Echoes grew roots. Schools opened where kids learned to read light and beats like letters. Musicians taught safe patterns. Engineers taught shields that could refuse a harmful signal. Lawmakers wrote rules. The new language moved from battle rooms into markets, hospitals, and play yards. Harumi walked through one such school. Children moved in careful steps, making arcs with glow sticks. They laughed when a slow arc meant hello and a quick flash meant wait. Their teacher, a soft-voiced woman named Lita, tapped a small drum and asked the class to copy a calming phrase. The children matched her, and the room felt steady, like a ship in quiet water. Raffi stood in a memorial square. Names glowed in the air, written in patterns that told short stories of people lost to early misuse of rhythms. He watched older veterans teach new guards how to listen, not only to sounds but to the emptiness behind them. Jorah opened a small school for engineers. She taught how to build machines that could not be tricked by stolen beats. Her students learned to wrap memory with consent and to mark files so machines would never show a private photo without a clear signal. Many systems signed the treaty and set up echo guards. Most guards worked quietly and saved lives. They stopped panic by playing steady patterns. They moved crowds away from dangerous beats. But not every place followed. A few fleets refused the rules. Some corporations hid rhythm packs in locked vaults. Black markets still traded cruel codes. The new language had a dark side that money could feed. One winter, reports came of a fleet that would not join the treaty. They hid under a name of old grievance and sailed in tight lines. Their leaders said they had a right to defend their memory. They claimed the laws would take from them what no court should touch. Those ships were the kind who wanted to keep the old power to force silence. The fleet moved toward a sacred site, an old station where many species had once sworn peace. It was a place of flowers in zero gravity and small stones from home worlds. The fleet intended to play a band memory wave there. If they did, the site would fill with frozen people minds held by grief and the world would watch and feel shame. The fleet wanted to shame the treaty makers and show the power of their sound. Harumi's call came at dawn. She and Raffi read the reports and felt the cold knot of a coming storm. The echo guards were small but fast. This time Harumi planned not to fight with a weapon but with language she hoped could heal. They moved in silence that smelled like metal. Harumi's ships flew a pattern of repair beats that told machines to open, to check, to give permission. Her pilots practiced a flight path that sang like a choir. The path was a sentence of trust. The fleet they hunted knew how to hear it. They might not answer, but Harumi hoped the words would do what steel could not. When the two forces met above the sacred station, the sky shivered with light. The rogue fleet started its memory wave, a slow, heavy chord that smelled of old fires. The station's visitors felt their chests stop. A child on a balcony began to cry as faces in his mind came without warning. The station trembled. Harumi's pilots did not fire. They moved into the pattern and began to sing a new series of beats. These were not counter-weapon beats. They were repair patterns. They told locks to open, to let people choose. They asked memories to step back so the present could breathe. The tiles in the station hummed. The chorus of repair was gentle and firm. Something strange happened then. The rogue fleet's device began to play a second layer of sound, a story hidden inside the memory wave. It was a true story of loss and apology from a leader long dead. The story had been folded into the weapon as a proof that violence could hold a truth. The tale slipped through the station and touched those who had stopped. For some it broke the hold. For others it pushed deeper. Harumi's team kept singing. Jorah's shields steadied machines so they would not replay images without consent. Raffi moved through the crowd and tapped a quick pattern into the hands of medics. The medics touched the pattern to people's wrists. Slowly, one by one, faces cleared and the breath returned. The child who had cried dropped his hands and laughed at a small bird that flew through the station like a bright dot. The rogue fleet watched this. Their officers listened and found, in the story hidden in the wave, a name they recognized, an ancestor, a leader once loved. Some of those officers faltered. They had thought that forcing memory would show the world their pain. Instead they saw their pain used like a tool. The sight broke some of them in a way that made them step away. In the end, the fleet split. Part of it held to its weapons and fled. Part of it surrendered, handing over devices that had been used to make people stop. Harumi's team did not celebrate. They counted the cost. They had saved lives, but the language could still hurt. The treaty had held this time, but only because people answered cruelty with care. The world changed slowly after that day. New laws closed loopholes. Schools taught consent as part of the grammar. Jora's students built tags that made memory patterns useless unless the owner agreed. Raffi worked with judges to make punishments for secret sellers. Harumi helped found a council where musicians and leaders met to watch for misuse. Small things changed too. Markets hummed with safe patterns. Hospitals used beats to steady hearts. Ships used light sentences to pass in crowded lanes without collisions. Children learned to clap and call the sky in safe ways. Families sent small songs to one another across systems. The new language grew gentler on most days. But the series ended not with a clear piece, but with a choice. The people had invented a way to speak that could bind or free. The final scene shows a schoolyard at dusk. Children draw arcs in the air with glow strings. An old veteran sits on a bench and listens. A young girl runs to him and taps a small beat on his palm, a small, simple rhythm that means remember, then smile. He closes his eyes. For a long moment he sits very still. Then he opens his mouth and sings that rhythm back. The sound floats up like a slow pulse across the town and into the night. It is not loud. It is not perfect. It is human. The last line of the series holds like a soft chord. When diplomacy failed, humans learned a new language of war and then, with hard work, chose to make that language teach the galaxy how to listen.